Hello and welcome to another chat conversation. A lovely return to the amazing Björn. And today we are recording it on the 31st of October. And so it's a very special time, but straight into you. How are you and what have you been up to and how have you been since I last chatted to you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm happy to be back. Um, I heard that your viewers had questions for me, and looking forward to it. So lately, I've been working very hard on finishing the Hamingja pagan streaming service. I think I mentioned that last time too. It will soon launch. It's a platform for people just like you, Jennifer, who are out on a spiritual journey and feel the need to have one place to go where they get all the information and help they need. So it's a platform full of courses, classes, documentaries, events. We're actually also going to have a digital service for religious trauma therapy, a very important topic in today's society. So I recommend all our viewers to check out the description, I hope you'll put a link and go to Hamingja Foundation and check it out. So that's what I've been up to.
You mentioned religious trauma. Can you just dive a little bit into that? I know I have these questions and then my ears
Yeah,
pick
no, we're
up.
fine. So fine. Well, I myself, I'm an educator. I have a degree in theology and religious studies. So I studied that at university, and I also worked a lot with coaching and therapy in general. So I thought, okay, I was looking into that, and I saw that. I personally, this is just taken out of the air, but I think that in America, this is much more common than in Europe. I don't know, but I have that feeling. And since I work with, and I also have a community, the Hamingja community with so many Americans, I saw that there was a huge need for this. And since we also see a rise in or a growth in people who want to unlearn their previous context, they also feel a lot of shame, fears. They feel controlled or stuck, or it doesn't necessarily have to be trauma, like in that you're actually traumatized. It can be definitely, but also the people who are stuck, who are afraid, who feel alone, who actually don't know where they should go. Um, so we offer religious trauma therapy, and we also offer spiritual guidance in a non-confessional way, since we aren't a confessional foundation at all. So and I'm educated within all the major religions. So there's no one single focus on that. Um, so yeah, so you maybe feel free to continue to ask. I know we have other questions too, but just feel free to ask
Thank
more
you.
about religious trauma therapy.
Is this an example like when I said to you like the whole praying thing, like I struggled with the thought of put my hands together and praying, and because that was a big stumbling block for me personally. And then you sent me a podcast about the pagan way of praying, and then it completely changed my outlook and how I approached it, how I saw it, because I was very much Church of England, very much down that route, and I just didn't like it, didn't feel comfortable. And then when I listened to your podcast and then I put it into practice, I was reduced to I cried because it was so sacred, so special, and it was just the most amazing thing I've ever done.
Hmm.
So would that be like that trauma that to me so imprinted? So it's not trauma as such, as like you said, but it was an imprint that was a stumbling block. So that would be.
That's of course something we'd first have to assess and analyze if that's it. But it sounds like it, and I mean, I have been a pagan for all my life, and I always say that we're all pagan by instinct. That's also how I start the podcast very often, that we're all pagan by instinct. But even though that's the case, even though perhaps we want to walk in that direction, we can't deny the fact that we've all grown up in a Judeo-Christian context, which has colored us and influenced us completely. So no matter what we want, or no matter what we say, we are still colored by all of that. And it's not even always about breaking free from that. It's just the fact that you might not even know that you are so influenced and living by it. And perhaps in this lifetime we always will, but there are many, many things that people need to unlearn, break free from, and at least they need to see things in another perspective, or from another perspective. And that's, we can of course also help with the therapy and the trauma itself, but it's a lot about seeing other things, widening your horizons, so to say. And also and by doing that, you can also admit to yourself that, oh wow, I'm so colored by these things. So that discovery is very powerful. And then when you've discovered and seen things, you can also build upon that.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to my questions, because I said to you, I'm going to really be strict with myself and stick to my questions.
Yeah.
So when I Google paganism, Celtic paganism comes up. And so in England, because I'm in the UK, so Celtic paganism, but then there's also the Norse paganism, and also, which was mentioned by Fiona, was Germanic. So am I right in thinking that you follow more of a Norse paganism? And can you put me right, please?
I'll put you right. We'll clear things up here. First of all, it's important to say that Europeans in general, we consist of mainly three parts. And that is one part hunter-gatherer. That's to say that the people who lived in Europe way before anything else happened. And then one part so-called early European farmer. It was people who wandered up here from Anatolia and who introduced farming, their farming lifestyle. And then one part Indo-European, so-called steppe herders. They wandered westwards and southwards from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, nowadays in Ukraine and Russia, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So one part hunter-gatherer, one part early European farmer, and one part Indo-European. All Europeans consist of those three parts, more or less, depending on where you come from. They are all part of our DNA, and that's important to remember. But most often when we talk about these things, we focus on the Indo-European heritage, because de facto we are speaking English right now. That's an Indo-European language. I speak Swedish. That's an Indo-European language, etc. So they were the Indo-Europeans when they migrated. They were very, very successful in that, and they all came from this region, and they split up and wandered west all the way to Ireland, and they wandered southeast to Iran, Pakistan, northern India, etc. And that's often what we focus on when we talk about these things. So, and when you mention Celts, the Norse, Germanics, what else? Anglo-Saxons, etc., they are all Indo-European branches or peoples. So the let's say the first Indo-European people who came to the British Isles were most likely Celts, Proto-Celts. So that is, of course, a big part of where you live. Then we had the Anglo-Saxons who came from the continent, from the European continent. And so when we talk about Norse and Anglo-Saxons, they are both Germanic peoples of the Germanic branch. So Anglo-Saxons, they came from two nowadays German regions called Angeln and Saxon. So that's what became the Anglo-Saxons. And then we have many other Germanic tribes and peoples. And for example, the Scandinavian tribes and the Norse, they also came, but that was a bit later. So I obviously don't know the exact structure of your DNA, but it's safe to say that you are of Germanic and Celtic descent. And Germanic is an umbrella term for Norse, Anglo-Saxons, Franks, etc. So, yeah, to come back to your question, it's not surprising that when you Google it, you find both Celtic and Germanic or Norse or Anglo-Saxon paganism, because they were initially all part of the same people, but then split up. And does this make sense? Do you understand it better
Yes.
now?
I do.
Okay.
I do. So did we originally come from Russia then?
Well, there was no Russia back then, but we do come from the steppe, yes, the Pontic-Caspian steppe, which is north of, between the Black Sea and, I mean, Bulgaria, Romania, and then all the way over to like almost Kazakhstan. So north of the Caspian Sea. So that area, those huge grasslands and steppes, there lived our oldest ancestors, the people we nowadays call the Proto-Indo-Europeans. They obviously didn't call themselves that, but that's how we've reconstructed it. So we come from that area, yes. The Indo-European part of us come from there.
What made them move around then?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question. There's a lot written on that, but they were very adventurous. They were also the ones who tamed horses the first. So that was one of the reasons why they could actually cover huge areas and travel. So they had what do you say, charts with like wagons with horses, which most other peoples didn't. They were very adventurous. They were very they wanted to explore, they wanted to conquer in a way that other peoples maybe didn't. And they started traveling, and they also this is a huge topic, but they also had a system that they called choreos, which were young warriors who they did their rite of passage, that when you were to come of age, you were thrown out of the village and you had to be out for, some say 2 years, some say 4 years, and you were not allowed to have any, you were naked, you weren't allowed to have anything but your axe or your spear, and you fought in groups and you stole cattle, etc. This actually is mirrored in much later traditions like like berserkers and Vikings, all of that, and you have it in Greece and Rome, old Rome too. These traditions that the youth were thrown out, and you had to go out and survive. And when you had survived, you could choose to either marry and come back to the village, or you could start a new settlement or a new village somewhere else. And this is one of the reasons why the Indo-European people spread, because many of them chose to explore and to stay out there and to move on. And they were very, very successful in what they were doing. A lot of experts earlier, they used to say that we fought everyone and everything and we killed everyone, but that wasn't really they were very good merchants. So it wasn't really a very violent, what do you say, Passover, but they were very successful in what they were doing, and I think it's at least a third of the world's population today, or even more, half the world's population today speak an Indo-European language. So yeah, obviously they spread their culture. So and they came all the way from what we call dharmic religions, all the way from Ireland in the west to almost to the Philippines in the east. So you can imagine that how successful they were. So
Wow.
yes, so the Germanic branch and the Celtic branch are both branches under that umbrella of Indo-European peoples.
I thought of another question. So I've got naturally auburn hair with green eyes. So that would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So to complicate this even more is that when we talk about the hunter-gatherers who were here before the Indo-Europeans, even though they do share quite a lot of DNA, but that's another discussion. There were actually three kinds of hunter-gatherers in Europe, and there was the Western, which I'm sure you have more DNA from the Western hunter-gatherers, and there was the Eastern hunter-gatherers, and also in the end the Scandinavian hunter-gatherers, and some of them had blue eyes and very dark skin. They had very blue eyes and darker skin, like if you say, for example, someone from Sicily. And then you had some hunter-gatherers who had very fair skin but brown eyes, for example. And then you have the Scandinavian hunter-gatherers who were a mix of those two groups. So that also plays a role in the way you look, not only the Indo-European peoples. But again, now we're complicating things here.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going back to the yes. Right. So going on to God, because then that I mean, because oh no, I'm going to stick to my questions. I'm really going to be good because we can talk about this another time. So oh no. I really say to you, I'm going to stick to my guns.
But feel free. I mean, I'm here, so feel free to ask.
So we were all, I mean, nobody then said, oh, we're pagans. Everyone just lived accordingly, didn't they? But then the Abrahamic something came and started, because one of the things that I think I mentioned in the last video that I did with you, like in England, it was the harrowing, and then Fiona mentioned about the Germanics. One day about 4,000 were killed because they wouldn't convert to the new religion that was coming in from the Abrahamic, from the deserts. So they must have been, and when I listen to you, and that's why I had to butt in and like I had to go off tangent, but we were all living according to deep roots. It was just roots, and then along they came. They must have been so powerful to destroy.
First of all, we need to remember that, in this case, it wasn't really someone else who came in and conquered us. It was actually our own ancestors who, step by step, converted to these Abrahamic religions.
Why?
Oh wow, that's another book we have to write. But no, but these ideas, they were. I mean, things are changing. In the antiquity, there were many. The Abrahamic religions themselves, they are inspired by the Indo-European paganism. They took most of their material and ideas and thoughts from antiquity. So it wasn't completely alien or foreign to pagans, and then there were many reasons why this happened. I mean, maybe it happened by money. They were very successful. It also happened because they could show a very united front because they had this unity. I mean, everything in Abrahamism is about one unity. So I think there was a very unified like a front against the quote unquote old system. And we see, for example, here in Scandinavia that uh, a lot of people, we actually have a lot of proof where people doubted and they continue to like half on half follow their old traditions, but they were very interested in Christ, and they called him White Christ, and they compared him to Baldur, one of the gods, the bright shining one, for example. So they were like, oh, maybe this is him, or I mean, there are so many reasons. Also because these were new philosophical streams that which interested these people a lot. So it wasn't just by violence. And we should remember that it was our own ancestors who did this, all of this, slaughtered people. It wasn't, we should never think that it was other people mainly that came here and crushed us. That's just not true. And that's the really sad part, that's not the case.
Yeah, I just thought something when we look back on the last 4 years, you kind of like, yeah, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But you know what I mean, don't you? Because
Yeah.
you know what I mean, totally. Right, thank you. So going back to my questions, that's really answered my question. Yeah, when I look back on the last 4 years. So who, like, when we talk, like, people have said to me, who are the Nordic gods?
Mhm.
And some would say they weren't actually people, but they were principles of nature. Could you
Yeah.
explain a little bit, please?
So do you want to talk about who they
Who?
are or what
Yeah.
they are?
Who and what they are, please.
Okay.
I
These
know that's going to
topics.
be a massive
I
topic.
mean, that would of course depend on who you ask. There are so many opinions about this, and there's so much fighting about this too. That people fight all the time on social media about what the gods really are. And that depends on if you're what they call a hard polytheist or a soft polytheist, etc. If you ask me, which you do,
Yes.
I would say that, I mean, again, we always need to go to existence and life itself. If I study, the other day I saw a picture of what it looks like with inside of a cell, a human cell. It was so complex and so detailed. So I was like, this can't just be by chance. How does nature know how to build and construct all of this? And how is it that, for example, if I cut myself, my flesh grows back more or less the way it was? I mean, there are so many fascinating. Or, for example, how does nature know when to become spring, or when the leaves are about to fall or to fall? How do they know all of that? Do you understand what I mean? That
Yes.
that doesn't just happen. So if you ask me, there is a consciousness, a what I call chartus in my podcast, but we can all call it the all or the cosmic order or the whatever we want.
Natural law.
Yeah, that emanates and expands, and it is within everything. The gods, according to me and the original Indo-European view, was that the gods are like you say clusters, like clusters of, or like big collections of this energy, or almost like joints in the huge structure. So where you have a joint in this huge structure, you had a god. So each god is responsible for one function or another function. Can be anything. I mean, things we don't even think of. So wherever this all or this structure this order needs to be maintained and upheld, there's a God. And we don't, I mean, it doesn't have to be hocus pocus. It can also be physics or thermodynamics or whatever we want to call it. I mean, there are de facto functions everywhere in universe, and that has to be maintained and upheld by something. I mean, it doesn't happen by itself, right? And then what happened is that our ancestors also personified these functions. I think it was because it was easier that way to actually explain and to pass on that information and that knowledge, that ancient knowledge, by telling stories. Because Indo-European peoples, the main thing they do is telling stories. Storytelling and poetry and songs are the most important things. And this is also how they passed on information. So I think it was easier that way to use stories and names and personalities. And then we can fight as much as we want about if the gods are persons. I wouldn't, because there's an old Roman saying that if horses had hands and if they were to draw their gods, they would draw horses. Right. So that's quite funny. They said that already in antiquity, that if horses had hands and they would draw their gods, they would draw horses. And that's what we do. We are anthropomorphic or centristic, and we see things in a human way. So of course, when we try to explain, then we also explain by what we know and what we see. So I wouldn't say that the gods are persons, but I would say that they have personality, and that's a difference. They have personality and they have individuality.
Brilliant.
That's how I would explain that. For everything to be, because this Hartos word, it actually means to fit together or to be put together. So for everything to actually stick together and function, there has to be gods, spirits, energy, everything. And that's what I would say that the gods are. And if you want to go into who the Norse gods are, then we first have to, because I saw that you had mentioned Nordic gods, and it's important to make a distinction between Nordic and Norse, because Nordic, then you also include the Nordic countries, which is also Finland, and Finland is not an Indo-European language or culture. So the Norse gods are part of, I mentioned earlier, the Germanic umbrella. The Germanic peoples who wandered north of the Alps, all of the Germany, Poland, Belgium, Netherlands, up to Scandinavia, Denmark, etc. And so the Norse gods are basically the same as the continental Germanic and Anglo-Saxon gods. The Anglo-Saxon gods you have in England, of course. So you have Odin, that's how you pronounce it here, and you have Woden in England. And so these people, the Germanic peoples, they brought their gods obviously with them. Indo-European peoples never bring their spirits, their land spirits, because they are tied to the area or the region, but they bring their gods. So the Norse gods are the same as the continental Germanic, the Frisian, the Anglo-Saxon, etc. gods. So what else? And the Germanic gods, just like in the other Indo-European branches, they are depicted as being in or living in two separate groups or races. The Aesir and the Vanir, or the Asar and Vana, as we say in Sweden. And they also live in their respective realms. And I don't know what else I mean, so to sum it up is that the Norse gods are basically, well, I know that people hate when I say that they are the same. Of course, all Indo-European branches worship and view their gods in their own cultural way. That's, I have to say that. But the Germanic gods in general, they are basically the same. Even though we spell them differently and we have, but yeah, they have the same meanings and the same functions.
Going back tiny little bit, you said about the Nordic and Norse are different.
Yes.
I didn't know about that. Could you just tiny bit, the Nordics, what were the Nordics?
Yeah. So yeah, Old Norse is a language. Norse, that is the language that later split up in, for example, Icelandic, Danish, Swedish, etc. in the in the medieval times. So Norse is the name of certain peoples and a language. While when you say Nordic, that could mean, for example, the Nordic countries, which is well, so for example, that Finland is included in Nordic countries, but Finland is not at all. I mean, the language is not Indo-European at all. It's a Finno-Ugric language. Now we're making it very complicated here, but so their culture and they have their own gods, even though, of course, in Sweden and Finland, we of course influenced each other with for example, with we believe that shamanism came in from Finland, for example, and with the Sami people too, who are also a Finno-Ugric people and language. So yeah, so it's important to separate those two. That Nordic can mean the Nordic countries, and then you also have Finland, but Norse means certain peoples and a language, which is only it only belongs to Scandinavia.
Right. I'm gonna leave that there because that's a whole different subject.
Yeah.
So how did our ancestors, because I'm really going to drop the term pagan because I don't like it. Well, I do, but I don't.
I think we mention that last time that sometimes, I mean, I don't think that pagan is a good term either, but on the other hand, if that's a term that people use and understand, then perhaps it's okay too, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So how did our ancestors believe in reincarnation, and what was their views?
Yes and no. As always, that has actually varied a lot over time and depending on where you are. But again, I'm sticking to Indo-European paganism. Paganism can basically mean anything, but here we're talking about the Indo-European paganism. So yes and no, it's changed a lot. Sometimes you see beliefs in reincarnation, in this eternal cycle. Sometimes you see beliefs in that when you die, you actually die and you go to a specific place, and you'll like, for example, hell was originally a Norse pagan realm and goddess, and you see the Elysium or the Elysian fields in Greece, and already the Proto-Indo-Europeans, we're talking 7,000-8,000 years back, they too had they actually called it Albion, which is interesting considering what that England is called Albion. So Albion means, I think it means white cliffs or white mountains. So they also saw something like they viewed it like either you were reincarnated or you actually came to a place and you stayed there. And sometimes they actually thought or believed in both, that some parts of you were within this cycle and some other parts left and went to this specific place. On the other hand, their view of death wasn't at all the same as ours. Because they, for example, in ancient Rome and Greece, they they believed that even though you were dead, you just went underground and you lived in a realm underground, and you still had a really big impact on your yeah, your kids and the other people's lives. A huge impact on that. They lived in another realm, but they still had huge impact on our lives. uh they believe that no matter where you go, you still lived on, in a sense, and you played this big role in people's lives still. Um, so when it comes to eschatology, where we go when we die, it's varied a lot, and sometimes they actually believed in both. One thing is for sure that um, pagans, Indo-European pagans, believe in that some parts of you are divine and immortal, not the least, of course, your soul, but they also split the soul into several parts. But so not least your deeds, your honor, your karma, or what we call hamingja. Um, our ancestors had a very complex view of the human being and her soul. Some parts of that soul were immortal. There's a part of you that is divine and of the same material as this all that I mentioned, this divine all that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
And that part will exist forever. And these parts could also be immortal in several ways, either within this world and cycle or transcending it. To make this a bit simpler, I will actually highly recommend episode 6 of Hamingja podcast, our podcast that we produce. There I go through all of these parts of the self, immortality and reincarnation, etc. So episode 6 of the Hamingja podcast. This is very complex, as you hear.
Mm.
It's but yes, depending on when and where, and sometimes both, they believed in reincarnation. And sometimes, no, you go to a place and that's where you live forever, um, as a dead person. And like I said, sometimes they believed in that you actually just go underground. The very first view of death and ancestors was that they used to bury. The reason we actually venerate ancestors and what later became gods is that initially the ancestors were the gods. You always buried your ancestors below your house,
Mm.
so actually under your hearth fire. And this hearth fire became the symbol, and on the hearth fire you also had sometimes small figures or like sculptures. And they've even found houses. Archaeologists have found houses where they have dead bodies from with the same DNA, or like the same what do you say, the same kin, for 1,000 years. So ancestors and relatives buried there for 1,000 years straight in the same house. That's incredible, and that's not really how we live these days. But so no wonder that they believed in the fact that the ancestors and the spirits are really there, and they either care for you or you have to please them, so to say, and you have to be their host.
Yeah, because I always remember like years ago hearing that same exact thing. And they would have buried, because there was a documentary on in England where like this village, and they said all the bones were like smashed up because they thought like it was a way to protect them. And I thought, no, that's just a lie. They would have buried them in honor and in respect, and the whole body would have been laid out, wouldn't it? And feet had to face a certain direction, didn't it, when they buried the feet with the whole
Yeah,
body? Yeah.
but those are also things that have varied a lot over time. How
Yeah.
you buried people, in what direction. I mean, sometimes they were buried facing east because that's where we believe that the divine light. I mean, that's where de facto the dawn is, in the east, and that's also where we view how we view that the divine light. That's where it rises. So the sun rise. That's the divine light coming back. So sometimes they were buried towards the east. It has been to the west. It's been with ochre in the graves. There's been so many different ways. So there's not one single way. But yeah,
I wanted to ask you about runes, but I could talk to you. I want to talk to you again, and I want to talk. I don't want to talk about runes with you
we were
tonight.
also about. We should also talk about trauma, weren't we? DNA and trauma. But
Yes,
maybe we
that,
won't have time. I don't know.
no, but that's what I want to end on because
Okay. Yep.
I'm going to come back to the runes and the ancient ways another time if that's possible. But what I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I see is, from my experience, is so many people are wanting to know about the old ways and the old wisdom because I see so many people, and I'm not judging at all, but observing and also from my point of view, because that's why I've been reaching out to you, because there's something lacking in life, and I feel so strongly that what you're offering is a platform where people can find their roots and can reach out, get the answers, because I strongly believe in our DNA, in our blood, in every part of us. We know the old ways, and we're all searching to find our way back. And I feel that that's the essence of why there's so many things, like the buzzword is mental illness, anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, because we have been so pushed to think like and I know I'm going off a tangent, but Native Americans, we've seen what's happened to them. We forget that's happened to the Europeans as well. And I feel your platform is a way forward where we can get that support and knowledge and wisdom and the rituals and the daily practice and the daily simplicity of life, because
Yeah.
we're all craving our roots again. I truly believe.
You know what? We're not looking. I just want to say that we're not looking for our way back. We're looking for our way ahead or forward.
Yes.
Our tradition is not about the worship of ashes, but about the preservation of fire. That's something I often say too, that let's not believe that paganism is something static or frozen in time. Never was for our ancestors. They developed, they grew, they explored, they learned, and we should too. And they also understood that spirituality, it's life itself. So I actually want to, I'm not going to correct you, but that's what I often hear, that like, oh, I just wish that it was like in the old days, or I want to find my way back to that. No, we should find our way forward towards the future, but standing strong and having something to push off from, with strong roots. And we can only do that because, just like you say, there's so much lacking today. We know it deep within. We know it. We all know it in the Western world. We all know it, but we refuse to accept it. And that's also why we see so much, yeah, mental illness and unhealth and abuse, etc., drug abuse, and because we lack purpose. We are looking for the meaning of life in the completely wrong place. Um, so what we do in Hamingja Foundation, we accept that we too, I mean, spirit, we spoke about that before we started recording, that the struggle itself, life itself, the journey, that is the spirituality. When the rosebud grows to become the rose, that is the spirituality, to become, to follow that eternal natural order and listen and accept that, okay, is it that I am supposed to be? What is the best version of myself? What is it that I'm supposed to do, be? What is it that I love? And only follow that. Only follow that, because you know the rosebud, it doesn't hesitate. It doesn't really say, "Oh, I want to become a frog." It doesn't do that. It follows its dharma. Dharma is your own natural order applied on yourself. So to listen to that and to follow that, that is what creates purpose. Only that, nothing else. And I'm guilty myself. All my life, up until maybe 10 years ago, I was looking in the wrong places. I was always someone who was longing away. I always wanted to go somewhere else. I wanted to travel. I was looking for wealth, and I worked in the fashion industry in Paris, and I thought I was so cool. But I was still there was still a black hole within, because you can't find it that way. You can't run away, and you can't just because I was lying to myself. I really wanted to be someone, and I tried to impress. And maybe I did impress because I had a high position in the Paris luxury and fashion industry. So maybe I did impress, but I never impressed myself. Now I impress myself because I do the things that I believe in, and I believe in order and beauty and creating that community, etc. So when we do that, that's also when we listen to ourselves. That's when we create purpose. There isn't a meaning of life per se. We just follow what we're supposed to be, and when we do, that's when you feel that it sings in all of your body. You know, they say that when you hit the golf ball correctly the first time, it feels like I was about to say it's like an orgasm, but that's what it should feel like. When you do the right thing, you can feel it, and people know that they're not doing they're doing what others want them to do, or what they think that they are supposed to do.
So with me, like I said in my last video, what I found, which I wasn't looking for, was my love of doing these conversations on YouTube. Is the one thing that really I love, because that's a big thing, isn't it? Following you, I get confused because I feel like our purpose in life is our job, but it isn't, is it? Our purpose in life is what we
Our
come
purpose in
for.
life is what you are, nothing else. It's what you are. So if you continue to go against your true nature, then you're going to suffer. Of course, you're going to suffer. If you're a frog and you say that I want to become a rose, well, that's a long way, you know, it's a long way. There's going to be a lot of struggle. And and since we've built a society where we want to show off, we want to do things that look good, that sound good, and people, they are like dragons. They collect gold in piles, and they sit on that pile, but all of a sudden they realize that, wow, it didn't help. It didn't help that I have this pile of gold, because I'm still very lonely, feel lost, etc. So we built a society where I'm actually very tired of people who just complain and say, "Oh, it's so terrible in society." But we live in a way that is completely unnatural to our true nature. And that's what so then we, at least, because we do live in modern society and we are going to continue to do that, we need to find a lifestyle and our own way of life um, that works better for us, so we can still be true to ourselves. And I remember when I started following that voice, and I asked myself, what's the worst that could happen? And I was like, well, you could die. You could die of starvation, or you have no money. And I was like, okay, but then let's die. Let's die. Because, but the thing is that when you follow Dharma, you don't die. You actually, the contrary, you live and you stay alive. There's a big difference between being alive and living. Uh, Living is what you do when you're following this Dharma. So, but then just ask yourself, okay, so what's the worst that can happen? Yeah, well, maybe you die. That's to me, that was okay. I was like, but I still have to do it. And when I started, when I continued doing it, I realized that whoa, there's so many doors opening, new doors. You don't die. You don't die when you follow Dharma.
How do you know what your dharma is?
Oh wow, yeah, that's I mean that is spirituality. That is to get to know that, to realize that, to realize self-realization, etc. I mean, I've written some articles about this. Maybe I should link those too, actually.
Yes.
But um, you do, and again, it's not about hocus pocus, or it's about just looking at things. Listen to yourself, listen to others, ask them, okay, what do you think I'm good at? Um, I asked all my relatives and my friends, like, okay, so, and it's so funny because when I was younger, everyone told me I should become a teacher. And I hated that because I was like, because my grandfather was a teacher, and I was like, I don't want to be some kind of dusty teacher, dusty old teacher. But the circle has now, what do you say, shut. Uh, what am I doing nowadays? Well, I'm not a teacher per se, but I do teach people, I do guide people, I mentor, I coach. So the funny thing is that everyone told me what they saw, but I refused to see it myself. But when it all comes down to it, that's what I'm doing now. So I'm following Dharma. Um, it took me a long time, but so what do? You meditate, you walk, you look, you try a lot of things. You have to just try. And it's not too late. I mean, I wish I did that when I was younger, but you just try things. And when it feels right, it is right. Well, of course, we don't live off of, like, if I love climbing, maybe I can't make a living out of that now, but and I don't like my father used to tell me, Björn, you don't eat books, because I always wanted to work with books, and he was so worried that I was never going to make any money working with books. So he told me, Björn, you don't eat books. And
Mm.
well, maybe that's true, but if you follow Dharma, what feels right and which you know is right, then you will find ways to make a living. That there's always You can always do that. So again, meditate, listen to yourself, take yourself seriously, because what a lot of people do is that they never listen to themselves. They listen to others. They listen to what looks good, or what they feel forced to do, but they don't listen to themselves. And a lot of people, me included, don't dare to actually make a change and start something new. So, but again, I'll link to a lot of practical, like, practices you can do to find Dharma. You can of course, also, the Ikigai test, the Japanese Ikigai it's called, where you find, like, your core. So people could look at that too. But there are many ways. Yeah, I'm just
Thank you.
rambling here, rambling
No,
on.
no, you're not rambling, not rambling. So I will hopefully catch up for you again to talk about runes and carry them for protection, because it is a fast subject. It's so fast, because there's things that I'd like to ask you about in future about runes for protection. What was our ancestral way of eating and doing our daily practice? But that's a whole different subject, and
Mm.
I'd love to talk to you again about that. But
You just said something about um, scars and wounds in our DNA,
Oh, I
like
did.
so ancestral wounds, because that
Yes,
also touches upon uh, mental illness, etc., or like yeah,
yes, I
trauma.
did. I
Yeah.
said the slaughter of so many people, our ancestor, we must carry the scars and the wounds in our DNA. That was what I wrote down because I've just read it here.
Mm.
So we do carry the scars and wounds of what's happened, haven't we?
Mm.
And how would you suggest that we bring healing to our wounds?
First of all, I want to say that trauma stays with us for generations. It isn't just symbolism or some kind of hocus pocus again. It's important here to point out that pagans don't believe in some kind of new age hocus pocus and made up stuff. We interpret life and existence itself. The so-called rational people, they used to laugh at me or other people when you said things like that you can get generational trauma and that these happenings and events stay with us. They used to laugh at concepts like karma and Hamingja too. But then all of a sudden, science found out about epigenetics. Do you know what that is?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, our feelings that we have, not necessarily our feelings, it's our ancestors' feelings, that our
Yeah.
fears
So
and
that
hang-ups.
what we go through in life, good things and bad things, that changes us, not only in our psyche, emotions, and memories, but actually also our genetic code. It means that you're not done genetically when you're born, which is very fascinating, but that your genes actually change depending on what you go through. So, for example, if you go through trauma in this life, your genetic code will change. There will be a genetic memory. And that in its turn will, of course, have an effect and influence on future generations because that will uh, get into their genetic code too. So future generations genetically inherit what you've done and what others have done before, what they've felt, what they've experienced. So karma or hamingya is not just a mythological or religious concept. It's actually real. It's very fascinating that you can actually change your genes while living and taking action. So it's funny how science it takes science so long to discover and prove things that our ancestors already knew millennia ago. But what was your question? Sorry, I just wanted that's a very important point that is actually true.
How can we, yeah, what can we do to heal these wounds? What can we do on a not daily practice, because that sounds very new agey, but what can we do in this lifetime so our wounds, our scars
Mm.
don't carry on to future generations, that we can make the difference with this awareness?
I know that the first thing I started doing was to look at patterns. What is it in my life that continues to happen? Like fuck ups, bad habits, bad experiences, things that happen to you over and over again. Like, why did I lose that money? Why did I lose that deal? Why did I fuck up that? Why did I? You understand what I
Yeah,
mean? And also bigger patterns in life. So that's when I started doing, and I realized that okay, there's a pattern in my life, but maybe that also comes from something older than myself. So that's where I started. I started looking at patterns, and I started looking back. Okay, my father, my mother, my grandfather, etc. What happened in their lives? But then, so that's a good start. But it's I find it the most important, maybe to start with, isn't really to, because it's very complex and advanced to try to start by going to some kind of spiritual communication and healing ancestors. There's a lot of very competent people who can do these things, and they've had a long spiritual journey and talent. But maybe that's not where average Joe should start. Maybe it's better to actually, what do you say, to break the chain, to make a change in your own life. Maybe that's where we have to start. Like, to heal. Well, right now, I can't heal every bruise and cut, etc., in my lineage, but I can actually stop the bleeding. I can stop the bleeding here in my own life by doing what I think is right, living the life I want, seeking happiness and purpose. These kind of things. That is healing in itself, because healing actually comes from the etymological root, to be the same root as being whole. So when things are put together and when they are the correct way, that's also why marriage was considered healing, actually. That's another topic. But when we start healing ourselves, we've also started, because time isn't linear. So I believe that time is like spherical or cyclical, or I believe that we're in this sphere of time and space. But so when we start here and now, we also heal in both directions, both ahead and backwards. So start with yourself. Start with the man in the mirror, like Michael Jackson said. No, but so start here. Seek happiness, purpose, and then
Contentment.
look at patterns, and then maybe when you've continued with on your spiritual journey, you can also start meditating, you can start journeying, you can start and going back, and you can do burial, like mound sitting, etc. And you can, there's so many things, but I don't want to recommend very advanced things here and now. I want to recommend people to actually start with themselves. Stop the bleeding.
I like that.
And
Thank
you
you.
know, you also heal your ancestors if they see that you're successful and happy and live a good life. You, of course, that's the best gift they can. I mean, imagine if your own kids or grandkids, if you see them happy, genuinely happy, of course, that heals you too, right?
Yes.
So, because that's all you want. You want to see people happy. So, make yourself happy and purposeful. Then that's also a way of healing, because of if you come from a long line of fuck ups, of people who lived miserable lives, empty lives, then if you create a wholesome, healthy, happy life, you also start healing them, because you stop the, what do you say, you stop the chain of events, or the yeah, you broke that chain, so to say. So that's healing in itself, and that's something we often forget.
That's very powerful. Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
I'll have to come back again, you know.
Please do. Please do. Thank you so much for your time and everything that you give. It just blows me away. I mean, it just blows me away. So thank you. And so I'm going to, in my very Melton Mowbray, Leicestershire accent, I'm going to say thank you very much for everyone for listening. I'm going to put all the links to your website and everything that you want to share. And I'm so grateful for you being here to listen in to our conversation. And I'll just hand it over to you to say goodnight as well.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, Jennifer. It's been a pleasure, always fun. And to all the viewers, check out Hamingja Foundation. Again, spirituality is nothing else than life itself. So yeah, these are great talks, and very often we get away from the topic itself. But I mean, again, that's the journey, isn't it? So
Yes.
perfect. Thanks for having me.
Oh,
Lovely.
thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So I'm just going to stop recording and say goodnight from Melton Mowbray. Good night, everyone.